Today, we're talking the politics of overrides with our own overpowered politics reporter, Adam Reilly. Good morning.
Overpowered or overpowering?
I'll take both.
Okay. All right. Simultaneously overpowered and overpowering. We'll see how the conversation goes.
Okay.
And pick the adjective afterward.
Okay. Or listeners can vote. So anyway, good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Mark.
So for background, we had the largest override ever approved in Arlington this past weekend. That was almost $15 million. But also this week, Malden voters said no to either about a $5 million override or an $8 million one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all about Prop 2.5. So I want you to start us off with a history lesson about what is Prop 2.5.
Okay, and this is one of these things where I understand how it works, but I always struggle to explain it. So tell me if I'm being ambiguous or if I seem overpowered, and we'll take another crack at it.
Okay.
Prop 2.5 passed in 1980 as a ballot question. It kicked in about 1982. It does two things. It limits the amount of the tax levy that any city or town can gather in a given year to 2.5% of the assessed value of commercial and real estate properties in that town. So there's a cap every year on property taxes that can be collected. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay. It also creates a limit from year to year, basically saying that if the property in a given town stays the same, the property tax levy, the amount of money taken in, cannot increase more than 2.5% from year to year. Now, usually properties don't stay the same. There's new building, new growth. There's wiggle room allowed for that. But the general idea is if you've got all the same properties, you can't take in more than 2.5% more than you did the year before.
And these override votes in local communities are a built-in exception to these limits, right?
The great big asterisk when it comes to Proposition 2.5 is unless you pass an override, in which case you can spend or take in a whole lot more in tax revenue, and you can spend a lot more as a result.
Now, you looked into this. We are seeing more overrides than ever before lately, right?
Yeah, there's this cool state database that you actually turned me on to. I wasn't aware of it before you told me about it. In fiscal year 2018, there were a couple dozen overrides, in some cases more than one in a given city or town. In fiscal year 2022, there were again a couple dozen overrides. In fiscal year 26, 6 dozen overrides. So the number really has spiked massively. I talked to Adam Reilly. He's the executive director of the Mass Municipal Association, and he detailed some of the reasons for this huge spike that we're seeing.
We're in a situation where healthcare costs are rising 10, 15, in some communities 20%. Utility costs are rising. Costs of education, specifically school transportation and special education, are growing, sometimes also in double digits. And then combined with that, unrestricted general government aid from the state actually diminishing in its buying power as compared to inflation over the course of the past 18 years. You really do have this perfect storm or convergence of factors that have made cities and towns have to either consider drastic service level reductions or asking their local taxpayers for more revenue.
He mentioned unrestricted government aid there. It is, compared to 2002, when you adjust for inflation, cities and towns are getting 25% less from the state in unrestricted aid that they can spend on anything than they were back in 2022. So it's a big drop.
Yeah, so perfect storm, as he says. It sounds like a very good case to be made for that. Now, you are our politics reporter, so we want to know, what about the politics of this? Like, who gets hurt politically by overrides? I mean, it's not a happy thing to be getting less money. Go to your voters and say, empty your pockets more.
It's not a happy thing. And I want to play one more bit from Adam Reilly, in which he argued that override fights, however they shake down, whether it's a yes or a no in the end, that they introduce this kind of toxicity into the civic discourse of whatever city or town they're happening in. Let's take a listen to him.
I think it does create tension in the community, even in places like Arlington, where there is a precedent in history of the voters backing overrides. You have some people, actively campaigning to support local public services and to support a higher level of taxation. But you also very well could have a group of people who are now actively campaigning against local government services and questioning the needs for a certain level of services. And, inserting that acrimony into the local civic discourse is always problematic.
But going beyond that, I think it's really interesting to ponder who voters might blame for overrides if, in fact, your city or town votes to increase taxes, so votes for an override that's going to ramp up taxes dramatically. Who do you then hold responsible? Do you hold the mayor in your city or the selectmen in your town responsible? Do you hold the state responsible for not providing enough aid? Or do you just have this sort of incoherent, I don't want to pay more taxes, and it's ridiculous that I'm being asked to pay more taxes response? In which case, in a year like this one, where we've got a proposed 1% cut to the state income tax on the ballot, maybe you say to yourself, I'm going to vote to cut the income tax by 1% because I'm sick of paying more taxes, even though paradoxically, by doing that, you're taking money away from the state, making it less likely that the state is going to give cities and towns the money they need, making it more likely that there will be overrides in the future.
And we have a governor's race that you and I have talked about and how affordability plays into that. I want to know, could Governor Healey somehow have some vulnerability here in all this?
I think anytime people feel like affordability is a great big struggle, there's a risk to the incumbent. Now, there's a very strong case to be made that there are structural issues here that are beyond her control. But again, whether people take the time to dive into this because it's somewhat convoluted stuff, or whether they just say to themselves, I'm paying, I'm not supposed to be paying as much more in taxes this year as I am. We just passed an override. It's the second override in 7 years. I'm being taxed to death. I can't take it anymore. Maybe you do, just without thinking through the particulars, hold that a little bit against the incumbent.
So, and of course, we've talked about how Healey would like to put this all on the Trump administration. But however you look about where the blaming finger points, we're in bad economic times that may be getting worse. And this is no good for any politician, I guess.
Well, it's up to the challenger, right? Whoever her Republican challenger ends up being, to make the case not just that things would be different if they were in office, but why things would be different. And that's the tricky part. I think whoever runs against Maura Healey is going to, that's the challenge they're going to have, is articulating what they would do differently to lead to less taxation, more affordability. And that's not as easy.
GBH politics reporter Adam Reilly, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.